Richard Chen leaned back in his leather chair, a smug smile crossing his face. The TV studio lights were hot, but he didn't sweat. Men like him never did. Honestly, Sarah, he said to the host, being homeless is a choice. I could survive on the streets better than most of them do. It's about willpower and intelligence. The audience gasped. Social media exploded. Within an hour, the hashtag Richard Chen Challenge was trending. Sarah Martinez, the show's host, saw an opportunity. Mr. Chen, would you be willing to prove that? 24 hours, no money, no ID, no help. Cameras follow you. If you quit before the time is up, you donate $1 million to homeless charities. Richard's eyes narrowed. He'd built a tech empire worth $300 million. He wasn't afraid of anything, especially not proving a point. I accept, and when I succeed, everyone will see the truth. 3 days later, Richard stood in downtown Los Angeles. His designer suit was gone, replaced with worn jeans and a dirty t-shirt the production team had provided. His wallet, phone, and credit cards were locked away. A camera crew would follow at a distance, but they couldn't help him. 24 hours, Richard muttered. This will be easy. Hour 1, Richard's confidence was solid. He walked through the streets, analyzing his situation like a business problem. I need food and shelter. Simple. He approached a coffee shop, planning to ask for their day-old pastries. The manager took one look at him and said, "Get lost. We don't give handouts." Richard was shocked. I just asked politely. How rude. He tried 3 more places. Same response. His stomach began to growl. Hour 3. Richard hadn't eaten. The afternoon sun beat down on him, and he was thirsty. He found a public water fountain and drank, but the water was warm and tasted metallic. He sat on a bench and tried to think strategically. A woman walked by with a shopping bag. Richard stood up. Excuse me, ma'am. I'm in a difficult situation. Could you spare? I don't carry cash, she said without stopping. But I didn't even. She was already gone. Richard tried 20 more people. 19 ignored him completely. One elderly man gave him $1. $1. Thank you, Richard said, genuinely surprised by how much that dollar meant. Hour 6. Richard used the dollar to buy a small bag of chips from a vending machine. He ate them slowly, savoring each one. He couldn't remember the last time food tasted this good. As evening approached, he realized his next problem. Where would he sleep? He walked to a homeless shelter he'd seen earlier. A line of about 40 people stretched outside. Richard got in line. After an hour of waiting, he reached the front. The shelter worker looked exhausted. I'm sorry, we're at capacity. Try again tomorrow. But I have nowhere to go, Richard said. Neither do they, the worker said, gesturing to the people behind him. I'm sorry. Hour 9. The temperature dropped. Richard's thin t-shirt wasn't enough. He found a spot under a bridge where other homeless people had gathered. Some had cardboard to sleep on. Some had blankets. Richard had nothing. He sat against the concrete wall, shivering. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. In his mind, he'd imagined finding clever solutions, proving his superiority. Instead, he was cold, hungry, and scared. First time? Richard looked up. An older black man with gray hair and kind eyes sat nearby. He held a worn blanket. Is it that obvious? Richard asked. You still got hope in your eyes. That goes away after a few weeks. The man extended his hand. I'm Frank. Richard. Frank studied him for a moment. You that rich guy from TV? Doing the challenge? Richard hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. He expected anger or mockery. Instead, Frank chuckled softly. Well, you're learning. That's something. Hour 12. Richard couldn't sleep. The ground was hard. Every sound made him jump. Footsteps, shouting, sirens. His body ached, his stomach cramped with hunger. Around 2 a.m., it started to rain. Light at first, then harder. People scrambled for cover. Richard had nowhere to go. Within minutes, he was soaked. Frank appeared beside him, holding his blanket over both their heads. "Come on, I know a spot." They moved to a nearby alcove, barely protected, but better than nothing. Frank shared his blanket. It smelled bad and was full of holes, but it was warm. "Why are you helping me?" Richard asked, teeth chattering. "Why wouldn't I?" Frank said. "I have nothing to give you." "That's not how this works. Out here we help each other, because nobody else will." Hour 15. Morning came. Richard was exhausted, freezing, and starving. His body hurt everywhere. But worse than the physical pain was something else. Shame. He'd spent years believing homeless people were lazy, that they'd chosen their situation. Now, after just 15 hours, he understood how wrong he'd been. "Frank," Richard said quietly, "how long have you been out here?" 3 years. Lost my job during the pandemic. Couldn't pay rent. Once you're out here, it's almost impossible to get back. You need an address to get a job. You need a job to get an address. It's a trap. Why don't you go to a shelter? Same reason you couldn't last night. Not enough space, not enough resources. Too many of us, not enough help. Richard felt sick, and it wasn't just from hunger. Hour 18, Frank took Richard to a church that served breakfast. They waited in line for an hour. When Richard finally got his plate, watery oatmeal and a small apple, he almost cried with gratitude. After eating, Richard's stomach hurt worse. He wasn't used to eating so little. Frank noticed. "First time being hungry, really hungry?" Richard nodded. "It changes you, makes you understand what matters. Food, shelter, safety. Everything else is luxury." Hour 21. Richard was breaking. His feet had blisters. His back ached. He smelled terrible. But the worst part was the invisible feeling. People walked past him like he didn't exist. Women clutched their purses tighter. Parents pulled their children away. Security guards watched him with suspicion. "I'm still human," Richard wanted to scream. "I'm still here." He understood now. This was what Frank and millions like him experience every day. Not just poverty, but invisibility. Society had decided they didn't matter. Hour 24, the challenge ended. A producer approached Richard with his phone and wallet. "Congratulations, Mr. Chen. You made it. How do you feel?" Richard looked at Frank, who sat nearby on the curb. Then he looked at the camera. "I feel like an idiot," Richard said. His voice cracked. "I was wrong. About everything." Tears ran down his face. "This isn't survival. This is torture. Nobody should have to live like this. I've been out here one day and I'm broken. Frank's been out here 3 years. He's not weak. He's the strongest person I've ever met." He turned to the producer. "I'm donating the $1 million. But that's not enough. That's nothing." Back in his office 1 week later, Richard sat across from Frank. Between them was a contract. "I'm starting a foundation," Richard said. "Affordable housing, job training, mental health services, real solutions, not just handouts. And I want you to run it with me. You know what people actually need. I don't." Frank stared at the paper. "Why me?" "Because when I had nothing, you gave me half of what little you had. That's leadership. That's character. That's what this foundation needs." Frank signed the paper with shaking hands. 6 months later, the Chen Franklin Foundation opened its first shelter. Not just beds, but a comprehensive program. Housing, job counseling, health care, and dignity. Richard spoke at the opening ceremony. 6 months ago, I thought I knew everything. 24 hours on the streets taught me I knew nothing. Homelessness isn't a choice. It's a failure. Our failure as a society. He looked at Frank, who stood beside him in a new suit, the foundation's co-director. I lost a bet and found my purpose. I thought I was teaching society a lesson. Instead, society taught me one. The most important one: until you walk in someone's shoes, you have no right to judge their journey. The audience applauded, but Richard barely heard it. He was looking at the people entering the shelter, people who would have a warm bed tonight, a meal, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to rebuild their lives. 24 hours had changed everything. Not because Richard survived, but because he almost didn't, and in that failure he found his humanity.